Welcome back to the Ben Mulroney Show. And before we close out this show with two great guests for This Week in Politics, a note for tomorrow as part of Small Business Week. We're going to have an incredibly successful entrepreneur, Michael Hyatt, in studio during our 11 o'clock hour. So if you're a small business owner and you need some advice, if you're an entrepreneur needing direction, you can call in, talk to Michael, and get some insights. All right, let's continue with our conversation. And listen, every province needs advocates for business, for trade. And they can come in all shapes and sizes from so many different sectors. In Manitoba, the Premier's office has chosen former journalist Richard Madden. And nothing wrong with someone coming from that sector to help out with trade, but a lot of people are pushing back over this appointment for a couple of reasons. One, his salary is about $400,000 a year. And two, according to opposition, this job has led to no memorandums of understanding, no trade deals whatsoever thus far. And the Premier was caught, I found, flat-footed for somebody who's so good at expressing himself. He didn't do a great job explaining why Richard Madden was the guy. And I'd love to start with you, Max, about your thoughts.
Yeah, I have no problem with this, especially in this time with the volume of threats to our economy being sent our way by the Trump administration. $400,000 is a great investment if you can get their attention on an issue that's relevant to your province. So, we do this in Alberta. We've done it for a long time, sending people to Ottawa to Washington to pledge our case and make the arguments on our behalf. I think other provinces should do it as well. Obviously, Ottawa needs to do it, but provinces have their own view on things. And again, if people are upset about a $400,000 salary, imagine if he could have saved Manitoba, call it $200 million in economic damage from the Trump administration. That is a great investment.
Yes.
So, I understand wanting to keep an eye on where you're spending these things, and it is a big salary, but it's one with a potential big payoff for taxpayers.
Oh, yeah. And listen, I'm not one to nickel and dime. It costs a lot of money to run a country and run a province, and it costs what it costs sometimes, right? And not to say you should be profligate in your spending and just light money on fire, but, there are costs associated with running an economy. And so that's not my issue. What I found, Dimitri, and again, I go to you because of your expertise in communications, Wab Kinew has acquitted himself so very well over the past few months as a great and effective communicator. And it just felt like he got caught flat-footed in the legislature when asked about this appointment. He said he's got the looks, he's got the connections. I mean, you got to have a better answer if somebody asks you, why is this the guy?
So we'll see if Richard, and I've known Richard for 20 years, smart guy, hardworking guy, great networker. But I'll give you an example. The top diplomat in Washington is the Canadian ambassador. It's current Kristen Hillman. Her compensation falls anywhere between $270,000 and $320,000 a year. And I can tell you, on her desk is an exponential amount of responsibilities, much higher than what will be on Richard's. She is able to open way more doors, most likely, than Richard. So I'm not against the position. It's probably a position where you should be getting paid $250,000, $300,000 a year. I think the Premier went way overboard on paying somebody $400,000, especially in these times. And why do I say especially in these times? Because in these times, the only true voice that matters is the federal governments. There will not be any side deals with Manitoba or Alberta or Ontario or Quebec. So good appointment.
Yeah,
I believe it is a merit-based appointment. Richard is the right person to do this. I would have considered him and possibly chosen him. He should take a $100,000 salary cut.
All right. Well, we'll wait and see on that. I can't remember the last time I ever saw somebody willingly give up $100K, but we'll have to see if Richard listens to the show. And by the way, for the record, what you just said about Richard Madden, I've heard echoed from other people as well. So I don't dispute his qualifications whatsoever. My issue had more to do with the Premier, who's been such a good communicator, seemingly being caught flat-footed over being able to justify this appointment. I do want to talk about the terrifying letter that some property owners in BC got, Richmond, BC, where they were told that because of the decision that came from the BC Supreme Court that their property rights over the homes that they've had, some of them as long as 50 years, may be up for grabs. And look, I wanted to spend a moment on, I don't know whether there is a causal relationship between the years of what I feel have been empty and performative land acknowledgments and this, but there's no way one doesn't have something to do with the other. And I have felt for some time, Max, that stopping with the land acknowledgement without filling the void, you open up an arena when you say something like a land acknowledgement. But if you don't fill that arena with some meaningful dialogue, then somebody else is going to fill that arena with meaningful dialogue. And in this case, the BC Supreme Court did that. I think there's been a lack of leadership on going beyond these land acknowledgments and doing anything meaningful. And here is where we are today.
I think I agree with that. The Supreme Court in BC doesn't care about what politicians say around land acknowledgements. They care about the facts and the facts going back to, the 19th century and beyond. I think the decision by the mayor of Richmond to send this letter out the way it was written is incredibly irresponsible. I think some of the media outlets who have kind of seized on that fear and amplified it are being incredibly irresponsible. I think what we need in this moment is a calm, mature, and fact-based approach to this. The Cowichan tribes, their representation, they've said they have no interest in invalidating fee simple title. They don't have any interest in impacting homeowners. It's just the governments that have violated the agreements they made with the Cowichan tribes, right? If we believe in private property, and I think we all do here, then this ruling is effectively upholding the private property rights of the Cowichan tribes, right? They entered into agreements with governments that have not been honored. So this is not going to impact landowners. The fear campaign around that is, I think, really irresponsible. And you see, the BC government is appealing this. The courts have said they're giving them time to reach an agreement with these tribes. I suspect there will be compensation, which they are due, and that is the nature. That is the form of reconciliation that we need to be seeing more and more. It's not just land acknowledgements, not just empty words, but real promises and real substance.
Dimitri, how do you see it?
Just to jump on everything that Max said, at the end of the day, Indigenous reconciliation has to be pursued, seriously, fairly, with respect. But you're not going to build reconciliation by destroying certainty, rewriting land ownership overnight, or threatening the very foundation of private property in Canada. So it's a court ruling that ultimately the government will have to address. Right of possession is whoever legally owns it.
Yeah, listen, I'm learning. I was learning from Max there. His perspective is one I hadn't heard yet, so I do appreciate you bringing that in. It's going to give me a lot to think about. I do think, and I'll throw this back to the both of you, that I know that the decision has been stayed for 18 months in an effort to allow the government to negotiate. I don't think staying the decision is the right move. I think appealing the decision is the right move, because you can't negotiate with one arm tied behind your back. You need certainty, as Dimitri said.
That's right.
I hope it gets appealed so that those negotiations can happen on an even playing field. But I don't know if either of you would agree with that or disagree, Max.
Well, part of the issue, the reason why these tribes have had to go to the courts is because governments have refused to negotiate with them in good faith. They haven't struck deals with them to honor existing agreements. Andrew Coyne wrote a really good column about this in the Globe and Mail, saying, again, if you're in favor of private property rights, you should support the Cowichan tribes here. They are standing up for their private property rights. This does not have an implication for the rest of the country. BC is a very unique legal environment because there were no treaties. It is kind of on its own in that respect, but this is not going to invalidate private property rights. It's simply going to mean that these communities get the redress that they have long deserved.
All right. Well, guys, I love starting the week with you. I hope you have a great next few days, and we'll talk to you next Monday.